Welcome world to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We are back at the place where we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money. Malcolm, how are you doing this fine Tuesday afternoon?
Doing good, man. It's, glad to be back.
Glad to be back. Had a nice little week off. You were out of town and I was at a work dinner for the wife. So we're back on a Tuesday. We want to remind people this show runs as a podcast and as a television show, so it might seem as such at times. We also want to remind you can always listen to episodes of Manage Your Damn Money now on Apple Podcast, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play.
Look at us.
So
making moves.
We're growing up and doing big things. In life news, as we always talk about, Malcolm, I went back to my home by the sea, also known as Hampton University.
Is that what y'all call it?
Because Hampton is like a peninsula. It's surrounded by water on three sides.
Sure, but so is Andre 3000. Nobody, anyway, never.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
Really? You never heard International Players Anthem?
I don't even know what that means.
Because your favorite rapper is Usher. I got it.
Exactly. So I went back. It was a fun time. It's interesting now being married and all that stuff. You used to go back to homecoming, especially when you first got out, and you went to homecoming, so you can understand what I'm talking about. You go back thinking you might be able to like rekindle an old flame or something like that.
Okay.
I always think like that's a real early part of homecoming. But this was my first time back without that being at all in the,
How often do you go to homecoming?
Kind of like every other year, every maybe. I think it's never been more than 2 years without me going.
Okay, because that sounds like you haven't been in like 5-10 years, and now you're like the old man that's like,
It feels like it, man. It feels like it. But seeing some old great faces was fun. It was people there I saw like on Instagram and Facebook later who were there who I didn't even get to see.
Happens all the time.
So shout out to those who missed my face and I missed your face, but I had a good time. I literally took like one picture there.
Yeah.
The entire time.
That means you had a good time.
Indeed it does. Well, as we do on every episode of Manage Your Damn Money, it is time for headlines. The headline we pulled for this show: you're probably paid less than you're worth. These 10 jobs have the most leverage for a raise. Big news, Malcolm. This is good stuff because people got to know if like they could be asking for a raise, but maybe they haven't.
Don't get anybody in trouble.
Right. This was a Mike story by James Denon, which takes a look at jobs with the greatest leverage and asking for money for salary, reporting a new study data from Glassdoor, which is like the salary website. On average, the story said American workers are due a raise of more than $7,500. And this is, of course, according to a study by Glassdoor, with even bigger gaps depending upon the profession, geography, and experience level. The company arrived at their data by comparing the market rate for different job positions with the median base salary people reported through Glassdoor's compensation tools. And just so we can remember, median, because I had to look this up again.
Okay.
Because I avoided most math growing up.
Okay.
Median is a value or quantity lying at the midpoint of a frequency distribution of observed values or quantities. So it's the one that's in the middle.
So to put that in context, though, really quickly, though, if you, me, 7 other people, and Bill Gates walked into a bar. If Bill Gates was in that bar, no matter how much money we had, the other 9 of us would be billionaires by average. So right. the median makes sure not to allow numbers to get askew based on one large outlier like a Bill Gates.
Indeed. And a quote from the story said, 3 in 5 employees don't negotiate their salary. And this was a spokeswoman from Glassdoor. That she also said that this data suggests that money is being left on the table. Negotiation obviously is easier said than done, but showing confidence and sharing a clear record of past accomplishments goes a long way. So this story mentions also that Thursdays are a particularly good day to negotiate, especially when you're like being offered a new job.
Now that was news to me.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it made sense when they explained it. So essentially the explanation behind it is hiring managers in particular are more interested in wrapping up offers and like negotiation processes at the end of the week. Because obviously no one wants to carry in their work from one week to the next.
Right.
And so obviously also they reminded us that you want to always take a few days to think about new offers that you get. To make it seem like, I got options, I'm playing the field, I don't need to say yes immediately. I'm not that anxious. So that's helpful. Malcolm, before we go down this list of like top jobs that, are on the list for raises, what would you think was on this list just based on like the first pieces of information?
So top jobs with the most room for growth, like people are basically
Leaving
most
money on the table.
underemployed.
Like, where would they be leaving money on the table?
Aside from Walmart workers, I would think Walmart workers are always complaining about how much they don't get paid.
Yeah.
I have to believe them. Like they bring it up so often that like almost when you get to the register and they get ready to ask you,
oh my gosh,
did you find everything okay? They're like, just so you know, I don't get paid enough. Did you find everything okay? So I got to put them at the top of my list.
That's what they do at Walmart.
That's basically what they do it with their eyes. So
okay.
Aside from them,
right.
I would think probably nurses,
okay,
hospital nurses,
sure.
The people that actually keep the hospital working.
Absolutely.
Probably don't get paid as much as they should.
Right.
I would also think maybe flight attendants.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Because of what they have to put up, or just airport staff, airline staff in general, probably because of what all they have to put up with from their employer and the general public, who's always disgruntled. So probably the two of those are my picks.
Okay, excellent. Well, at the top of the list, well, this is not the top of the list. Actually, it's inverse. So we're gonna go from 10 down to 1.
Okay.
The first thing in a job position that I've held myself, communications manager, and the potential salary growth was listed as at about 15% or $13,000 more. The median base salary, or that midpoint occurrence of the number, was $76,000 a year, but the current market value, at least when you account for all things geography and I think average everything out,
right,
is actually $89,000 a year, which is a crazy jump. 76 is like what most people are getting, I guess, or in the middle of what people are getting, and then the current market value is $89,000, which is a huge difference. And then also marketing manager was on there, another type of position that I personally have held in my communications career.
I feel like that's the same thing.
It is. It actually is kind of the same thing. Moving along from that, number 8 is a medical assistant.
Okay.
So you're kind of in the ballpark with the nurses thing. Potential salary growth is 15% or $5,000. The current median base salary for medical assistants is $30,000.
That is amazing.
Yeah, and the current market value is $35,000.
Jeez, $30,000.
Yeah, So then there's also the software engineer. Potential salary growth is listed at 15% or $17,000, and the current median base salary for a software engineer is $100,000 on the nose, while the current market value is more like $117,000, or actually, when you round up, $118,000. So that's a huge discrepancy there.
Okay.
Number 6 is web designer. The current median base salary is $52,000, and then the current market value is $61,000. Then pharmacist, this is actually crazy. So if you're a pharmacist and the current median base salary right now is $118,000, but the market value is $141,000, which is like,
that's significant.
That's a crazy jump.
To have pharmacists already make a lot of money.
Indeed, they do.
So for them to be considered underpaid is saying something.
Yeah, that is something. But the market changes even when you're in your job, so you have to make
I'm in the wrong daggone business. That's what that means.
You got to go back to school to get in that business. Then we have here a Java developer, 17% salary growth space. The median base salary is $78,000. While the current market value is $94,000. Then number 3 is research assistant, potential salary growth standing at about 21%, with the current median base salary at $30,000, and then of course the market value, which is listed at $37,000, or more like $38,000 when you round up. And then the last 2, Malcolm, to your point again, hitting that healthcare nursing area, certified nursing assistant, potential growth is about 21%. The median base salary for a certified nursing assistant is $24,000.
$24,000.
There's lots of ways to get by, Malcolm.
Jeez.
So stop doing all that.
No, I'm on their side. I'm not. I'm not knocking them. I'm knocking the people that are only paying them $24,000.
Hey, man, it's a capitalist society. So then, the current market value for a nursing assistant is actually more like $30,000. So there's like a big $6,000 gap or so there. And then the number 1, again, in the healthcare medical field, emergency medical technician, which is 21%. And there's over $7,000 gap there, with the current median base salary listed at $27,000 a year, but the current market value slated at $35,000.
That's got to be the first one to change. If I have a vote, EMT's got to be the first one to change.
And that's what that is, EMT. I didn't even think about it when
that is the person who, when I have a heart attack, is responsible for keeping me alive on the way to the hospital.
Indeed, it is.
And I don't need them being disgruntled at their last paycheck that came this morning,
right?
And like miss giving me that one last chest compression or something. And
you know what? They don't pay me enough to push this man's chest again.
So I'm gonna give you equally how much you're paying me to give him. So
in effort,
that you only get 8 chest compressions, sir, even though you probably need about 12. So I need them to get paid first.
Absolutely. Healthcare definitely an area where people can, people make a lot of money in healthcare, but not everybody's making a whole lot of money in healthcare. Right. So it's interesting because this kind of reminds us again, which we've talked about in previous episodes of Manage Your Damn Money, that it's always good to be thinking about your job and the jobs that you hold through the lens of negotiating for more and presenting in opportunities to do that whenever possible. So some of the key factors in remembering to negotiate, and like I said, we've mentioned it in the previous episodes. We talked about HR and then also career. Number one is you got to know your market.
Sure.
And so like if you're in Idaho, the market is going to be a lot different for certain jobs than it is in DC.
Okay.
And so if you're going to live in Idaho, you got to live with what they got available in Idaho for employment. And so
that was never a concern for me. So okay.
Exactly. Then
Idaho's on my list.
It's on your list. All right.
It wasn't before, but it is as of today.
It is as of today. And then number 2, be able to stand behind your asking, whatever you're asking salary-wise, confidently. Be able to present facts of how you've done or how you've done in the past with previous employers in a casual and confident fashion. And then you also have to, something that's really important that I think people don't want to forget is you got to make sure that you don't ask for outrageous compensation. You got to know the business model. Okay. So like you can't walk into a nonprofit and say, y'all gonna pay me $80,000 and they have 5 employees. Like there's some expectation, I think, there that what you're asking has to match the business model of the business that you're walking into.
So here's something key, I think, to keep in mind, because you keep hearing every chance he gets, the current occupant of the White House bloviating that American jobs are the strongest they've ever been. Yeah. The jobless numbers are down. Unemployment is the lowest it's ever been. Thanks, Obama, by the way. All of those great things, when in reality, what's not being shown through those statistics, although somewhere in there they may be true, we do have the lowest unemployment rate we've ever had, and we do have the fewest jobless claims that we've ever had.
Right.
But wage growth is what matters most in this sense.
Absolutely.
So yes, you do have, sub 5% unemployment,
sure,
but nobody in that group has had a raise since like 2009.
Yeah.
So let's call mid 2009 the emergence of our way out of the Great Recession,
right,
if you will. So for the private sector, not for government employees, but for the private sector, wage growth targets every single year is about 3.5% to 4%, depending on whose model you use. Since mid 2009, wage growth has been pretty much flat.
Yeah.
So we've stagnated all the way through the last like 8.5, let's call it, years.
Right.
To the point where, yes, it's great to have a job for all of these people that you just mentioned, but as the cost of everything else is rising,
absolutely,
housing costs, like we'll get into in a minute,
absolutely,
my wages need to grow in some kind of relation to all the expenses that I'm paying for. Otherwise, I just have to completely cut something off.
Right.
So whether that's my health insurance, my car, my kids' daycare, whatever it is, something's got to go because my wages haven't come up to meet my expenses. That's where the real challenge is for this government of ours. And so far, folks haven't quite risen to the,
Absolutely. We want to remind people you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. In today's conversation at hand, Malcolm alluded to it, the millennial housing catch-22 and what to do about it. We're going to talk about in this episode as Malcolm said, rising cost of housing, whether it be in owning a home or in renting. We're going to talk about all the elements connected to that. And of course, if you want to hear more and hear us go more in depth about negotiating and career and salary and stuff, we have 2 great episodes with guests, Sanaa Rasul and also Deborah Owens. Just scroll down in our podcast feeds and you'll eventually find it. So this is Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We're going to take a quick music break here from Beats by Beeman. We will be right back right after this. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. In this episode, the conversation at hand, the millennial housing catch-22 and what to do about it. The single greatest expense we all face in living life is paying for where you sleep. Whether you rent a room, a studio, share a house with 5 friends from college, or are a full-blown homeowner, we all have to pay for a roof of some kind over our heads. Lately, Malcolm and I have been come across a lot of stories which have inspired us to take a look at the specific challenges millennials are facing in finding reasonably priced housing options which would allow you to be fruitful in your finances at large. And Malcolm, in preparing for this show last night, sometimes I come across random things at like the very end of when I'm preparing for a show. Mm-hmm. And I came across this video, which is an interesting video. It's hilarious to me. I pulled a snippet of it. It's called Millennial Homebuyer. It's on YouTube. We also posted it on our Facebook page. But it's by CBC Comedy and then also IFHT Films. So we're going to play it real quick. It's just a snippet. And this is pretty much what we're talking about in this episode.
Got the fridge with the doors with the crushed ice. New pipes so I never have to flush twice. I'm talking more bathrooms in a rec center. Solid oak door, man, it couldn't get better. So what you got from me?
Well, judging by these financial numbers you gave me, it looks like there's no way you could afford anything even close to that. Ever. But come with me. I think I can show you something a little closer to your price range.
So you're telling me I can't afford hardwood? Well, what about the yard and the 2-car garage? Could I get a little loan from the bank still? Nope. What's 10% of 1.5 mil? Maybe I could crowdsource a little cash from a kickstart. This chart says I can't afford it in the rich part. Tell me I don't have to get a house out where the hicks are. No one ever told me getting property was this hard. Look, if I save for the rest of my life at the rate that I'm earning, I wouldn't come close. Oh, no. In the 80s, my dad bought a house and a car. I'll be 80 when I can get those. My mom's always calling like, why are you still renting? I hate to see all of that money you're spending. I'm good with my money. I practice frugality. Half the down payment is double my salary. I need help, I can't do it alone. I got student loans to pay, my cubicle's home. I'm working 80-hour weeks, man, I live at the office. And to be honest, I thought that I had a lot in my pockets, enough to get me in my dream home. Dream homes always come with hidden fees though. Mortgages that never leave like a disease. So to get the keys and the deed you're gonna need to...
So Malcolm, that's what we're talking about. What'd you think of that? That's the first time you've seen that, right?
That was my very first time seeing it.
It goes on for about 4 minutes.
I think he adequately captured the plight of folks in that millennial bracket pretty closely. I will say really quickly, quick caveat, and you remember this because you were at my girlfriend's birthday party. I got beat up kind of badly by one of my friends who owns a home, is married, and has 2 kids and like half a pet and the white picket fence and all that. Shout out to Stephanie. And she mentioned that we always kind of are downers on millennials and home ownership when there are people like her and her husband out there who own homes.
Absolutely.
And are actually achieving the quote unquote American dream in that right. And I just very casually pointed out to her that she lives way out in the middle of nowhere. I wouldn't be willing to I said, do they have a metro stop out there? So, but absolutely. To that point, there are some people out there who have achieved that, that rite of passage, if you will, who feel differently.
Absolutely.
But for the rest of everybody.
And this conversation really isn't even, it's about home ownership to some degree, but it's also about the really expensive rate of rent, especially in major cities. Real quick, interesting stories from this past week. We pulled a BizNow story from Laura O'Keefe, which reports on news that Amazon is now selling tiny homes. Mm-hmm. So Amazon sells everything. I'm sure by the time we're 50, they'll be selling us like things as random as like nail polish. Well, they sell nail polish, so I can't even
Superman vitamins.
I can't think of anything they don't sell.
You remember that Limitless movie? Have you ever seen that? They'll probably be selling those pills on Amazon in a minute.
I'm sure. The tech giant is now selling a variety of tiny home kits with prices ranging from $3,500 to about $60,000 at the top end, and it's doing it all online. Reportedly, only takes a few clicks before your home is ready for delivery. The one caveat for the price is that you have to own land where you put the tiny home. Mm-hmm. When you look at the home, it's actually the shipping containers that are stacked on ships at shipping ports and are also big favorites of fictional drug kingpins in movies.
Right.
So that's one thing that's interesting, like a $60,000 price point, and if you own some land, you can kind of get around some of the cost of owning a home, I guess. And then another item that's kind of interesting and ties into this conversation, which we actually publicized a little bit on social media, a headline from the Wall Street Journal which read, "Millennials' new weapon in bidding wars, parents' home equity." On October 2017 Wall Street Journal article by Lee Campion Carter, which explores the trends of millennials and young adults accessing their parents' home equity to compete in home offers and bidding wars by offering cash instead of traditional mortgage home financing. So it works like this. Parents refinance their homes to fund the full cost of their son or daughter's desired home and allows the child to compete as a quote-unquote all-cash buyer. And then when the purchase closes, the child immediately, so once the child's in the house, they immediately or eventually refinance their home into a traditional mortgage and use the cash they get to pay their parents back, theoretically making them whole on their mortgage that they took out and allowing their parents to pay back the mortgage that they borrowed against only before the time when they put the money up to, So it's just like ring around the rosy,
That's
they called
cute.
it. Yeah, isn't it cute? So like explain it further if I haven't explained it well.
You explained it right, but I hate
How do you feel about this?
I hate to be the dark cloud that I seem to perpetually be on this show. You will probably slide real smoothly back into your role as good cop on here, but
Because that's what I do.
It's a terrible idea for so many reasons. The first one being that's part of what led to the financial crisis that we got into in the first place in 2007.
That kind of finagling.
That kind of, not even finagling, that kind of leverage is the term. So increasing the debt that's already tied to the one asset. So you basically have increased the amount of, you parents have increased the amount of debt that you already have strapped to the home that you're in. I'm going to presume that anybody our age, their parents are either already retirement age or nearing retirement age. So what you've effectively done is strapped yourself to more debt at the time that you should be doing everything you can to unwind how much you're paying every month in debt service. So you've basically added to the lifetime of how long you're going to be paying for that house, assuming it hits the fan and all goes wrong. And I'll get to that in a second. But this is the time when, again, you should be aggressively paying off all of the debts that you have. So the reason I said
as a full grown retiring
or retired person, yes. So that's problem number one for me. Problem number two is, and I can say this with all the confidence in the world because a lot of my clients fall into that age band of what we just said, either very close to retiring or already in retirement. Half of their kids, if not more, are idiots when it comes to their money. So effectively, like if I were a parent, and I'm 65, let's say years old, I've got a 30-year-old child who wants to buy a house and I want to help them out. I go to leverage my house to help them get into theirs. There's a 50-50 shot that they're going to blow it. The only problem is you can't kind of just stand off to the side and watch them burn in this regard because you going with them.
Because it's your money too.
So the last thing you want to be doing at 65 or whatever age it is clocking in at Walmart, welcoming people in because your kid decided that they didn't want to make good on their mortgage payments anymore because it was too hard to keep that mortgage. That's the kind of nonsense that I see like my clients' adult children do. And they probably feel like I'm way more hard on them than I should be in those kind of conversations when they call me with the what should I do, where I'm like, look, let's just err on the side that your kid is an idiot completely and they're going to ruin everything.
Let's just assume that.
How do we do this without it affecting you as much as if you got fully involved? Think about it in terms of like, you're a parent, your kid needs to buy a car. They come to you and say, actually, this happened to me. So I'm going to use myself as an example. I was in college. I needed to buy a car. My transmission had blown up. Went to my mom and said, Mom, would you co-sign for me to get a new car? My mom said, son, I love you, but I'm not straddling myself to your debt, Like, if it hits the fan, I got to choke you out in the street, basically, Is like how it comes down. Said, I can help you find a down payment. I can lend you the money to have a down payment. But I'm not about to strap myself to your car loan because now I'm driving myself into the ground trying to pay it off. That's essentially the exact same thing that they're setting themselves up for, but on like a 25x scale in a lot of cases. Because as you just saw from the video clip we just looked at, the average millennial, and this is according to Home Depot too, this isn't just speculation, the average millennial is buying a home, and because it's not the $1 million home that they want it to be where they currently live, their way of upgrading and feeling like they're still in the place that they want to be is to have the high-end stainless steel professional grade appliances, the $30 a plank wood floors, the waterfall granite countertop, the HGTV special, basically.
Absolutely.
That costs a lot more than the average home price of middle America and whatever that you look at the statistics on.
Right.
So then you're adding that to a house that the neighborhood doesn't necessarily support the value.
Sure.
These are all just the upgrades that you wanted.
Not necessarily that are supported by the market.
But in an area where houses are worth $250,000, the house is worth $250,000. You're going to have all the bells and whistles you want. So again, if I'm the parent who leveraged my house to help you get into that house, if the housing market crashed the morning after you did
that
close,
finagling,
then we can't sell the house for more than what you've put into it in the first place.
Absolutely.
And as a person who unfortunately bought a house probably the worst possible month that you could have, September 2007, housing crisis started like October-ish 2007.
Days later.
I can tell you it is like the worst thing in the world to start to watch the news tell you it's going down, and you just now got into this thing that you're tied to for the next 30 years.
You'll be heartened to know, Malcolm, that you had actual support on Instagram on this. Michelle Nicole says most homes, single family, don't come with enough equity to pay this immediately. Not only that, but how does a child show proof of funds on that line of equity provided by their parents and not pay taxes on it? She said, I wouldn't do that. I'm all for using equity to make other investments, but across names and deeds, I mean, she hit taxes on that, because technically if your parents are taking out a loan against their home and handing you cash, that's income. And that's taxable income. Now, also, I heard from someone else on Instagram that they know of people that have used this in this market, DC, which is particularly competitive for young millennials and those between the ages of 25 and 40. And so there's people on many sides, as has been said in the past. But we want to, of course, remind people you're listening to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Today we're talking about the challenge of housing for millennials. That's an interesting, crazy way that people are like getting into homes nowadays. It kind of suggests that, as that video suggested, it's just getting so untangible, if that's a word.
I think intangible is the word, but I'm going to roll with you one way or another, my friend. I would just add to that really quickly, though. In order for that house of cards not to collapse, that Madoff Ponzi scheme, basically, that you just described, not to collapse, is for the market to continue going up in a straight line like it has over the last few years, and not stutter or come falter back. Because what happens is, like you said, you need basically, in the ideal scenario, for the house that I buy to immediately appreciate after I close on it, for me to cash out my parents, give them their money back, and then
it has to happen in a very succinct manner.
It's got to be a perfect storm. And unfortunately, we're probably at the top end of the housing market as it stands right now. Like valuations are like ridiculously stretched. So is there enough juice left in that lemon to be squeezed for you to execute a transaction like that in today's market, in today's dollars? If I were a betting man, I wouldn't put it all on black. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. We're going to take another quick music break. Hear another piece by Mr. Beats by Beeman. But if you have a question or concern or thought, send it to us at info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. You can also catch us anytime you need to. Just visit us on our website at manageyourdamnmoney.com. And then also listen to us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and now Google Play. We're available on all those different platforms, in podcast form.
Also on social media.
You can catch me at MYDM1.
At Malcolm on Money.
Absolutely. We're going to hear another piece by our in-house producer and co-creator of this show, Mr. Beats by Beeman. You're listening to and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back.
listen. Now listen.
Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money. In today's conversation at hand, the millennial housing catch-22 and what to do about it. Malcolm, you said you just pulled up a story earlier today about this exact topic. What was it?
Yeah, so this morning I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and they had a headline that said more people think renting is a better deal than buying.
Wow.
And so that like jumped out at me. So
That's crazy.
I jumped into it a little bit, and the statistic that pointed out was that 76% of millennials believe that renting is the more affordable option over buying.
Wow.
And that 76% is up 10 percentage points from when they did this survey a year ago.
Wow.
So that tells you how tough that trend is
Right.
becoming or has become.
Right. And a story that we actually pulled from 2016, it was an August 2016 opinion piece by Catherine Rampell in the Washington Post, which suggests a drop in home ownership trends are a good thing. The headline read, "Millennials aren't buying homes, good for them." The piece said that across all age groups, the U.S. home ownership rate at 62.9% has fallen to its lowest level in more than 5 decades. Home ownership rates among Americans under the age of 35 are barely more than the national number at just 34%. And again, this was in 2016 or August of 2016. Young people, it seems, are finding themselves falling further and further away from the American dream of home ownership, much to the chagrin of your friends who have the whole dog, white picket fence and all that. As you've surely heard by now, not only are they not buying their houses, but they're also increasingly not even renting their own places. Instead, they're returning to, or perhaps never leaving, Malcolm, as you mentioned, the nest. Today, about a third of 18 to 34-year-olds live with their parents. And for the first time since 1880, or was this right? 1880. It could be 1980. I don't know. A greater share of this,
Fat fingered it a little bit.
maybe a little bit. A greater share of this age group is bunking up with mom and dad than living in any other arrangement. So young people living with mom and dad outweigh the old people living with their kids.
Okay.
And then things have gotten so dire that young adults now have replaced the elderly, like I said, as the age group most likely to live in multi-generational households, and that's according to the Pew Research Center. So basically, millennials are poor.
So what else is new?
And
Overeducated and underpaid.
right, and relative to earlier generations, today's cohorts of young people, they're making less money given their levels of education. They're more indebted with student loans and more likely to be underemployed, struggling harder to sock away savings and facing shallower income growth. All those things which you've mentioned already, which all expounds and makes more difficult your housing cost situation. So I wonder this, what happens to a generation of people who buying a home doesn't feel at all reasonably in terms of the way it's priced. Mm-hmm. And also, as we'll get into, renting, especially in like major cities, feels is as expensive as owning a home.
Right. I honestly though, I think you're going to get a pretty dynamic shift, as we've seen already, but even more so in the mindset of a people.
Okay.
So where it used to be a bedrock thing, a rite of passage to say we own our home.
Right.
I own my home either way. I think the shift will become less and less taboo to never own a home.
Right.
Because so many people understand how difficult it is to get into the challenge to that though. And again, here's, me coming with the worst case scenario.
Right.
The challenge to that is all of the developers who create the housing, the apartment housing and such, all of those folks now control everything. Kind of like how Amazon controls online e-commerce.
Okay.
You'd have 10, let's call it, developers nationally here in the US. owning all of the rental housing.
Right.
That's, a conglomerate that is pretty powerful at that point.
Uh-huh.
So then what does that look like for competitiveness of rental rates and that sort of thing? And so then you got to be kind of concerned then about the fact that you have no control over your housing costs 30 years from now when your expenses are totally different. And then separately from that, like a lot of the high-rise apartment complexes, at least the ones built around here in D.C., they only have 1 and 2 bedroom options.
Right.
If I want to start a family and have more than 1 kid, what am I going to do? Like, where are they going to sleep?
Well, you can
in
move
the den. So you got to consider that too. Do the developers start to create 3 and 4 bedroom apartments?
Oh wow!
Like
That's an interesting question.
That whole thing changes a little bit too. But then I'm at the mercy again of whatever a developer decides they feel like doing today, which is not a great place to be from a control freak like me.
Absolutely, and that then points you back in the direction of owning a home. So at least you know what you're paying, like you said. 15, 20 years from now. Here are some of the challenges that stand in the way, which we've hit on, but we'll itemize them for you now. Stagnant wages in the American economy. That's issue number 1. Then there's also a very limited, or obviously much more limited than before 2008, market for home buying credit. Banks they have higher standards for what they will lend to and how much they will give to you in terms of buying a home.
Right.
Then there's also the increasing amounts needed for a down payment. I know that my takeaway from whenever I'm having the conversation about owning a home is you got to have a whole lot of money for that, because you got to be able to pay for the down payment and then also pay for your immediate expenses and then also pay for your life and hopefully not be broke. And that takes at least 50% on top of whatever your down payment is, at least. Then number 4, increasing rates of rent broadly, and especially, like you mentioned, Malcolm, in city centers. And then obviously the most comfortable rental options still restrict your ability to save at a rapid pace enough to eventually make a down payment on a home buy. So like even if you do live in one of the the nicer apartment complexes that are nicely priced, that makes it difficult then to go and save money to work towards saving towards a home or condo of your own.
You know what I think would make a difference? And I know it's never going to happen, having worked for 2 of the 4 largest banks in the world.
Right.
I already know it wouldn't happen, but just like in a rainbows and stars situation. If banks got back to relationship banking.
Oh, wow.
I've heard older people talk about where they bought their first home in their 20s.
Right.
And they were like fresh out of grad school, basically, fresh out of undergrad. Maybe they just started their job 2 years, 3 years prior. And the only reason the bank realistically made them the loan in the first place was because they had a solid education.
Right.
Or, you've got a degree, which tells me you care a little bit more about your future than the average person who maybe didn't.
Right.
So I'm going to take a chance on you and offer you maybe a little bit higher interest rate than you normally would have. Like when I bought my house, I got a first time buyer rate, which was like 1.5% higher than what it would have normally been.
Okay.
But I understood that because, I was like 19.
Right.
So if banks were to take a little bit more of a relationship banking stance and say, all right, you fit into this window, you have decent enough credit, you've proven to us that you're going to have the income to service this loan for the rest of however long you're in the house.
Right down the line.
We understand that you don't have and you wouldn't have had a chance to save $50,000 just yet.
Right.
We are going to give you the opportunity based on these parameters to own a home.
Right.
And if it goes wrong, then don't ever come back to us asking for help again. Which would be, pretty fair.
Right.
Unless and until we got back to that kind of place, I don't see the spigot being turned back on, for lack of a better term, in any kind of en masse.
So you're talking about relationship banking, basically.
Right. Where the bank is your friend?
Yeah,
I have too cliche to say it that way.
That would be a wonderful, nice thought, but in the world of Bitcoin,
it used to be.
It used to be, but old people always yearn for what? The good old days.
Well, that's true. Make America great again.
Bitcoin is a thing, and that is extremely transactional stuff. But anyway, another element, we've been talking about the home buying part. The other element, obviously, is the renting part. And the story that we pulled for this was the headline read, and this is actually a recent story this month, October 2017. Rising rents are stressing out tenants and heightening America's housing crisis. This was an October 2017 Forbes article by Joel Cotton, which reported on study data by Hunt.com, which finds renting is not at all a solution to the challenges of home buying for millennials. So, like you mentioned, the Wall Street Journal piece, which said, millennials are thinking renting is a solution. This kind of says it's not. 58% of the 1,300 renters in the Hunt survey said they felt, quote unquote, stressed about their rent, or many respondents said they couldn't save for future purchases like a home. As I mentioned before, all of this taking place when the national vacancy rate has fallen to 7%. So that means more of these apartment buildings are completely filled, which means that obviously the prices are probably going to go up based on, what's the word? Something in demand.
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand. There
Who
we go.
is filling these apartment buildings though? Like
we got to do a study or
I
something.
can't ride down like any major artery in DC, without seeing like 8 cranes up in the sky. And I keep asking, like, who is moving into these apartments? Like, DC's only 1.5 million people or 1.6 million residents or something like that. Where are these people coming from that are moving into these buildings that like create the demand for this supply?
Absolutely.
Find them for me, please.
And then the story went on to say that trend has continued even with apartment constructions in many areas, notably core cities, as we mentioned, like DC, because the new buildings tend to be too expensive for most renters. A story also said there's a strong relationship between high rents and high house prices. Although rents have not risen as much as housing prices generally, they tend to attract people who in the past might have become homeowners, but instead have been crowded out by the high prices. So to your point, Malcolm, people who in the past might have been able to afford a row home in DC are, the prices of row homes are so beyond their means that they're then forced to get into some of these more, expensive apartments, as you mentioned. The story then said the rent-related stress also points to a bigger crisis, the decline in the purchase of homes. One of the most prominent reasons for not buying a house directly relates to higher rents. It becomes all impossible to save enough for a down payment. And then real quick about New York City, incomes for millennials ages 18 to 29 have dropped in real terms compared with the same age cohort in 2007, despite considerably higher education levels, while rents have increased 75%. That's in New York. 75%, which is insane. New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco have 3 of the nation's 4 lowest home ownership rates for younger people and among the lowest birth rates. So it's affecting lives all the way down. You can't even have kids. According to Zillow, for workers aged 22 to 34, rent costs claim up to 45% of income in places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, and Miami metropolitan areas, compared with closer to 30% income areas for metro areas like Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston. So more moderate, quote unquote, cities is 30% of your income. That's a crazy mountain to climb for a generation.
So, what's also awful? The cities you just named. So Los Angeles, New York City, and DC are the 3 largest metropolitan markets in the United States. Right. 1 out of every 8 people in the United States lives in one of those 3 major metropolitan areas.
Oh, wow.
So you're talking about now 1/8 of the economy that can't afford to live anywhere where they live. So, if you just figure out a way to address New York, DC, and LA, you've solved 1/8 of the problem.
Right. And I feel like that's not even we're going to get to solutions for the personal individual on the other side of this music break, but that really raises the question in my mind of, what's it really going to take, if at all, to move this in a different direction, whether it's through legislation or just changes in terms of how the market and the economy are working. What is it going to take to make it such that a generation can actually enjoy and save some money for the future if, housing costs in particular are eating up a majority of, their income? Like, what does that look like?
Can I be the bad cop one more time?
You can go ahead. You've been the whole show, so let's keep it going.
What is it going to come down to? It's going to come down to people making a decision of what's more important to them.
Absolutely.
Do you want to own a home or do you want to have fun? And for the people who say, I want to have both, you go buy a tiny home.
Right.
That's an entire revolution that I don't understand one bit, but to each their own,
Right.
and more power to you. Like you just said, you can buy land like where my folks come from in North Carolina
Right.
for, a couple dollars,
Right.
and build you a tiny home on it,
Right.
and
That's gonna be
la-di-da.
it. That's gonna be it.
Your 2-hour commute to work, though, is gonna be a challenge. But I say, in all seriousness, I say that because realistically, the bulk of your wealth as an adult person is going to come from the value of your home,
Right.
the inherent value, the equity, as you mentioned, in your home,
Right.
and your retirement savings.
Right.
For the average person, that is where the bulk of your wealth is going to come from. Your net worth is going to come from. So if you just say, I'm going to keep playing around with this, or I'm going to, continue to sit on the sidelines and I hate to say it this way, but have sort of a woe is me attitude, then you're never actually going to participate, which
Right.
means you're never going to get a chance to catch that long-term appreciation in this asset that typically comes, depending on when you get into the home ownership game.
Right.
And it comes time to retire and really look at, where's our money going to come from. It's not going to be in the dirt under your feet.
Right.
So if you are, looking at it saying, there's no way I can get into a house, there's no way I can get into a house because I can't save enough for a down payment. The reality is there are actually currently different loan programs out there that are structured in such a way that you don't have to have the generic 20% down versus the 20% loan
Right.
to value. Some will let you get away with as low as 3 and 5% as
Right.
long as the strength of your credit supports it. So, you've got to be a little bit creative and flexible,
Right.
and you've got to be willing to kind of swallow the pill, so to speak, and not have as much free cash over the next 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, to take that trip to Maui or whatever. But aside from that, it is definitely doable. It's just not going to be as easy and as fun.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely. We're going to take another quick music break. We want to remind people you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. When we come back, some personal solutions for a dire generation-wide problem. We're going to cover some things you can do to maybe make things a little bit better for how expensive things are for living in, urban and city places like D.C. This is Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Personal solutions to the quagmire that is housing and finding affordable housing as a millennial. The rent is too damn high, and in many cases, so are the prices for desirable homes. What are we supposed to do, Malcolm? We're not housing experts, but basic tenets of common sense and personal finances practices still apply. The first one that we have here is be realistic. No matter the housing solution, you can't have it all, Malcolm, as you mentioned. Prioritize and take the best combo of things you want. So that's like commute, granite countertops. You got to take the L on something.
Yeah.
Then also, it sucks, but having roommates helps. Having 1 or 2 roommates can make all the difference, especially when you start out as a working adult. I had roommates, for the first 3 to 4 years that I'm lying. Actually, I stayed by myself a lot.
Oh, here you go.
But I lived out in the boondocks. Like, it took me a strong hour and 15 minutes. It took me a strong hour and 15 to get to my first, professional job
Okay.
on the metro and via bus. So that was like my sacrifice. I was paying like $700 a month in rent plus utilities, but I was living in Gaithersburg, which is kind of far from the city here in DC.
Agreed.
And then obviously keep other costs low. To get ahead in economies not favoring the quote unquote little guy, you have to consider every monthly expense, cable TV, cars, cell phone service. All these things have to be reconsidered when doing monthly savings. When I was living in Gaithersburg, I calculated how much I was paying per hour of TV for the time that I was at home, and then I cut my cable off. Because I was like, I don't use it. I just kept the Wi-Fi or the internet.
I'm happy with my no cable decision.
Oh, yeah. Malcolm hasn't had cable for how long?
Like a year and a half.
See, there it is.
I'm happy with that decision.
That's cool. And then also, if you can, as we've alluded to, live at home. Staying at home with your parents can be just the start you need to get a solid financial ground under your feet. And I think it's probably undervalued. This is just now my personal opinion.
Right.
Multi-generational households are probably severely undervalued in the
only in this country.
Only in American culture
Yeah.
do they say you're not supposed to live with your elders.
I blame BET. Like, you know, in the music videos, like think about like the videos we grew up watching, right? Like
I don't even know where Malcolm's going, but go ahead.
But just think about it, like No Scrubs. I'm 7, 8, 9 years old, and I'm told by TLC at the time, like I'm not supposed to live in my mom's basement and hang out the passenger side of my best friend's ride. But
that
is the most cost effective way to get to the club.
It is.
So what am I supposed to do? So I blame TV. Anyway,
I can remember being 12 singing "Don't Want No Pigeons," which was the remix of "Don't Want No Scrubs" at the girls at summer camp.
And I know what you were talking about, but you were setting yourself up for a terrible situation down the road.
Absolutely. The last two: live further away from the city. City living is expensive. Take the L and commute for savings and rent and/or housing prices. As I mentioned, when I wasn't making a whole lot of money in my first professional job, I was living far, and getting to and from work was a task, but it was what was necessary at the time. And then, of course, if all else fails, buy a truck, live out of your car, and shower at your local gym. And that's about where millennials this age are left with.
We're supposed to be helping people make good financial decisions,
hey,
and you were promoting living out of a truck.
Hey, man. Hey, listen, I actually have considered. Have you ever considered what you would do if you didn't have a home or a roof over your head?
What do you mean, what would I do? I'd go buy another roof.
Yeah, I got it. So I've actually considered, like, okay, if I didn't have a house to live in, one strategy would be you keep that gym membership up to date, and then you can always be fresh. Because I'm really a clean freak. I love showers. Sometimes in the summer, I'll take 3 or 4 a day just to feel clean throughout the day. So, like, that's an option for those who are living on the edge. You know, you can get a gym membership and you can always be clean.
Insert audible gasp. I've seen that guy in the gym too, and I hate that dude every time.
It's plenty.
But here's the thing: from a person who like really ironing is extremely important to me. Ironing my clothes.
Your clothes
is extremely important to me. Like I'm very meticulous about how I iron my clothes. Where am I supposed to iron in the gym?
Do you put creases in your pants?
Not in my pants.
Okay,
the dry cleaners do, but I don't put creases in my pants.
Okay,
like not my
good.
jeans.
All right, very good.
I'm not, dude. Come on, like.
Go ahead.
Do I look like that, Uncle?
No, you don't.
I hope not.
Okay.
Anyway, but like I'd hate to have to figure out how am I going to iron my clothes in the gym, or in my tiny van or tiny house or like whatever configuration it becomes next on HGTV. Like no, thank you.
You would just have to have a strong dry cleaning bill.
I would rather just not have any of the other fringe benefits that you said. Live in a place that is like 5 square feet in the middle of like a major area where I can walk to everything I need to do and take the metro and whatever else.
Right.
I won't own a car. I'm not commuting an hour and a half. Like no way. But to each their own.
Hey, man. Well, we discussed this enough. We hope this helped in some way. It feels like we were just going on and on about how terrible it is. But anyway, this is another episode of Manage Your Damn Money. Want to remind you can catch episodes of Manage Your Damn Money anytime on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or on Stitcher, and now Google Play. Just simply search Manage Your Damn Money across all those platforms. If you have a question, concern, or thought, and you want to send it to us at info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. You can also find us on social media. My handle is at MYDM1.
At Malcolm on Money.
And anytime you want to see what's going on with us, you can catch us on our website, manageyourdamnmoney.com. Until next time, be good with your money.
Peace.
Peace.